As Managing Director of Business Development here at Rodan, I lead our BD efforts in Ontario, handling large users in our distributed energy space, demand response, peak notification, etc. And our focus today is peak notification with a little bit of industry information of what is happening in the world of the global adjustment. So let's move on here. A little bit about Rodan. With 3 different business units, Rodan was founded numerous years ago on engineering and metering services. So that is largely connecting the largest power producers, power users, and utilities to the main IESO grid as a meter service provider. We started that approximately 2002 by purchasing a company called Canadian Metering Services. It's been in the Ontario market, 20 years before that. So from founding to today, there's about 30 years worth of, metering history here at Rodan. As time evolved, we started to realize our customers wanted to use some of that metering data we were collecting and started to help them do some analysis and use it for other purposes, which is what moved us into some of our energy intelligence offers. So this in some regards was shadow billing for some customers to ensure the ISO or the utility was billing them correctly, and it moved in through different acquisitions to modeling energy usage for hospitals or universities, modeling natural gas usage for some of those same sites, modeling water usage, for sites. And then over time, we leverage both of those into other areas, such as our distributed energy resource or DER business that includes loads that curtail for programs like demand response, ancillary services like the operating reserve, as well as ever increasingly for cost avoidance through the global adjustment program. And we're active in other markets in many of these services, whether it's Alberta and their coincident peak demand charge, or since early 2020 in numerous U.S. markets for both demand response and their various peak notification products. More recently, we've been working with a number of customers in putting in assets behind their meter in order to take advantage of some of these programs, avoid global adjustment costs, or sometimes even front of the meter projects that are making money solely through things like energy arbitrage. So our experience in these markets is unparalleled and leads us to being one of the dominant players in the peak notification business here in the province of Ontario. A little bit of history for folks as to global adjustment. If any of you sat on some of the webinars or presentations I've done in the past, this slide will look somewhat familiar because up until about November of 2020, the forecast for global adjustment going forward was the opportunity to avoid approximately 500,000 per megawatt of load reduced during the 5 GA hours each year. With the government's change in November of 2020 to take some green energy costs off of the electricity user and put it on the tax base, the opportunity for savings from a global adjustment perspective have been reduced based on strictly curtailing. But most of you will have seen some changes in your GA costs as of January 2021. With your Class B customer, your cents per kilowatt hour for GA did go down by about 20%. The value of curtailment, as you can see from the difference of the two slides, 500,000 and change to 400,000 and change, has also decreased by about 20 to 25%. If you'd like more information, on that to see exactly the gross numbers, you could check the ISO website, which does have, the total GA cost per month when you compare, January, February, March, April of 2020 to 2021, you will see costs going from about $1.1 billion a month to $800 to $900 million a month. So hence that 20% decrease. Well, I don't have a slide of it. I have been asked some questions recently about what happened in the month of February, because the global adjustment did drop dramatically by about 50% in that particular month. And that was largely a function of higher natural gas prices, especially in the United States, where polar vortex froze up Texas, et cetera, increase the hourly Ontario energy price, or the HOEP price, which means the global adjustment pot went down slightly by about 50%. But as you can see from, if you go to that slide, you'll see it is actually, back up to that 800 to 900 million per month, which was where it's expected to be for the balance of this year. So yes, it can fluctuate fairly dramatically, as it did in 2014-15 with the last polar vortex, but pretty consistently, even based on the changes the government has made, there's still a lot of money in those contracts, and so a significant opportunity if you are able to reduce load and hit those peaks. So how does Rodan help you do this? It's through our Peak Notification 2.0. We've been in this business as long or longer than anybody in the province, so our systems are redundant and backed up. So if you subscribe with Rodan, there's always going to be someone to help you to take your call and to provide information on what to do during those critical peak days. But we provide a number of different notices, all which are subscribable or unsubscribable for various people in your organization. And basically what we're doing is pulling a whole lot of data into our machine learning algorithms. So we have a number of weather inputs, different inputs weighted by load center. We have more information about curtailment than anybody in the market, because as the largest demand response provider in Ontario, the 300 megs that we have in DR is about double the size of anyone else, as well as those large users I mentioned earlier, people directly connected to the grid. We understand their behavior better than anyone in the market. The example that I like to use is folks in the gold sector. When the price of gold is $1,800-$1,900 an ounce, there is very little curtailment in that sector, because they're making an awful lot of money digging out ounces of gold. So they're far, far less concerned about the price of electricity than they are when the price of gold is $1,100 or $1,200 an ounce. So all of those factors roll into our algorithms to help us provide better predictive values and to drive curtailment times down. Because we are now advising batteries. We have customers who can only do some things for 2 hours, but other things for 4 or 5 hours. So our methodology has evolved over time to permit us to provide a high level of service for a wide variety of customers, and Rodan customers get the benefit of that based on how we have set up our curtailment notices and system. And in the event of a GA day today, we have live people to answer the phones to talk to you. We've got chat boxes and whatnot, but that can help you tie into day of intelligence that is not readily available through our large portfolio of people who are driving where the peaks will be, those large users, the people who could take 50 or 100 megs off with a steel mill or large thermomechanical paper machine. So the combination of all of our data and well-trained people available on the day of to provide assistance means our service is second to none. So how do we do that? We start by establishing minimum curtailment thresholds, i.e. where are we going to start calling you? And that's based on forecasts, including a variety of weather forecasts, and what we believe some of the early economic indicators are. So for example, right now we know that while some loads look very stable, if you look at them electrically, we know the output from some of the petrochemical world or ethanol that feeds gasoline refineries is down, given reduced travel due to COVID-19. All of these, drive our initial number to say we're going to call you when we get to X. Now you're going to see some samples in our system shortly that show us, can show you how you can give yourself some additional information if you, want to be more cautious or less cautious depending on your own business environment. We regularly communicate the probability and timeframes of peak in the upcoming period, whether that is tomorrow, day of, week ahead, etc. Obviously, the farther you are out, the less accurate predictions are, but we will give probabilities and likelihoods to ensure that you have the best information possible. We are monitoring the IESO forecast error. You can go to the site and see their forecast, but they're not reporting on themselves in real time like we are. We also have our own demand forecast that we update hourly on at-risk peak days, because the IESO does not update their forecast on a regular basis, because frankly, they don't really care if you curtail. They care about matching supply and demand so that the lights stay on in the province. So they have rudimentary tools on their website, but if you follow their advice, you curtail 3 to 4 times more than you will with Rodan's methodology. As I mentioned, we monitor all of the GA impactors, large users, DR programs, and that's our multi-level analysis algorithms that has over time driven curtailment down. In the early days, people were happy to curtail 6-7 hours a day, but when we heard from customers, we knew that that was that was getting tiresome, which is why we spent an awful lot of time and money over the last few years to completely rework our system in order to reduce the number of notices and drive curtailment times down, and also start to serve the ever-growing storage market. So types of notices that we provided are outlined here. Monthly, week ahead, day of, the actual curtailment notice, which is the number one importance, and then curtailment guidance. We have a variety of ways for you to receive these, so that you can pick and choose based on what each one of your users needs. So if your guy on the floor is going to be turning stuff off, he may not need all of these, and you can choose how those individuals actually do get notified. They're explained a little more, here, and they are in the emails are actually shown by urgency. Is it a low urgency level, week ahead? Lower urgency level, day ahead, because things do change in these periods. We're not going to issue a week ahead on a Friday when nothing is expected during the week. We're not going to issue a day ahead standby to tell you you don't need to be on standby. We're trying to manage the communication, because we all know that we get way too many emails and whatnot. So we communicate when necessary and when we believe you need to know something. A sample of that is on this particular screen. Key things that we're going to show you here. What is the actual hour that we are predicting? What is the peak rank to date? So if we hit this number, what will it be? The probability of sticking takes into account our analysis of the various factors that get adjusted 20 days after the actual peak day through what's called the AQEW calculation. I could go into that for 25 or 30 minutes and probably put some people to sleep, but I'm going to spare you the details. The reality is, for the medium ones, probability of sticking, you may want to curtail. For the high ones, you better be curtailing if you want to hit it. And everybody's risk tolerance is a little bit different, which is why we provide the variety of notices. But for your local people who are actually implementing some of these, you will need to develop some specific protocols to say, okay, on a medium, you want to be doing X, Y, and Z. And what X, Y, and Z is can be based on, your individual process. Can you turn the lights off for a couple hours, adjust air handling for 3 hours, and do something else for 4 hours? That's why we give the variety of windows there. An aggressive window for that shorter, curtailment activity or that battery. One in the middle, and then one is the longer one. Now the longer one might vary up to 5 or 6 hours, and we have customers that have generators behind their meters. They'll take our longer one and they'll add an hour on, each side of it, just to be sure, because the cost of spilling a little bit natural gas is far less than actually missing a peak. But in this way, you've got a number of tools to tailor to your own unique environment in order to get the best results, possible. We'll provide some insight, into, why, what we are seeing during the day. So the two most important notices you'll get will be this one, and then if we adjust in day, if we suggest that you're going to need to stay down for an hour because of changing weather patterns, or that you can go back up sooner, again, because of changing, weather patterns. With the history that we have, we're very accurate in, hitting the peaks. But you're going to see, we measure ourselves pretty aggressively because we have, customers, paying us to hit the peaks in 2 to 3 hours. And on that, here is our, longer term, report card. So yes, within our 2 to 3 hour window, there was one peak that we missed. We caught it in the longer window, but historically we are 97% accuracy, and I think that speaks to the fact that being in the business for a long period of time, understanding behavior, means we are very good at what we are what we are doing. So as I move on, I'll talk briefly about some of the things that we've all lived through relative to this this product in the COVID-19 world. Some of you will remember that about this time last year, some GA costs were deferred. Basically, March, April, May of 2020, the GA was capped at a certain amount. It is now slowly being recovered over everyone's bill during calendar year 2021, but it is a very minimal amount, to the tune of $4,000 per megawatt of peak demand factor. So if you were at 1 megawatt of peak demand factor in totality, you'd pay about $400 or $500, more a month. So very, very minimal impact, but I have gotten questions recently, about that. Last year, as of July 1 or June 30th or whatever the date was, the program was put on hiatus, as large industry was very concerned about ramping back up after the initial shutdown. In our conversations as recently as this week with the Ministry of Energy staff, there is no planned, no consideration being given to extending the hiatus. So what happened last summer with no curtailment? Demand reached 24,000 megawatts or so for the first time in many, many years. And DR was activated. So if you're doing both demand response and GA avoidance, you got the benefit of no curtailment and the benefit of being paid a little bit extra while with RODAN for your demand response participation. Because when demand response gets activated on an emergency basis, there's additional monies that we do share, with our customers. What else have we seen? As mentioned, the hiatus is ending. I guess I should put the caveat, less COVID-19 changes again in the next month, and none of us can, I guess, truly predict that. The comprehensive energy plan, or the budget, last year put a number of behind the meter projects on hold, some of them permanently, some of them, temporarily. We've seen some megawatts come on this summer, some in our portfolio of demand response. People, projects of our own, people that we know, people that we compete with. But there's not been a big influx of projects in this past year, given last year's hiatus. And in some cases, smaller projects because of the complexity and 10 to 15 year deals. The smaller ones have been put on hold permanently because the benefit available to the customer on a shared savings has been reduced because you're already getting some of those savings for free, from the government's budget. Now, for free, what's going to come out of the tax base, and no one knows whether it's coming out of your corporate income taxes, all of our personal income taxes, retail sales tax. It's all going to be there with the other billions of dollars being spent, on COVID relief. But it is another $3 billion going, from the rate base to the tax base with this, with this change. So we spent the summer modeling, behavior, see what customers were actually doing in this world of COVID. We had a number of customers asked us to continue to provide them with services last year because they wanted to understand when peaks were happening if nobody was curtailing. And so post hiatus, we provided notices to a number, hit all 5 peaks, 8 notices, not longer than 3 hours each. So, this would only really help, people who are brand new to the ICI program, because if we're just opting in as we speak, your peak demand factor will be based on 2020, versus everyone else's peak demand factor will be based on 2019. Now, moving on, I'm going to exit the presentation here and show you one of the things that is provided by Rodan as part of our peak notification offer, and that is what we call our market dashboard. This dashboard has the ability to track every single piece of electricity information published by the ISO, and there is a lot of it. This big white screen that you see is where we will put our notices when there is something to tell you, because there's nothing expected in the forward period. There is nothing there right now. But our service also does provide training so that you understand how to use this and potentially how to personalize it, for yourself. We show you some of the widgets to keep an eye on. The one that we watch and drive some of our predictions, a forecast error. How accurate is the ISO today versus other days? What some large users called dispatchable loads, may be doing, and we train you what to look for on those days. Now, for some folks, people may not look at this when they first get involved, but there is some flexibility here to say, okay, I only want to be notified, when it's, really, really high demand because I can only afford 10 hours of curtailment in the summer. We can help you set a demand threshold that is a little more aggressive than what we do for the for all of our customers. That would flash up here in the screen so that you would know, okay, now it's really getting high. It's above the one that above the level that we decided on back in the summer. Conversely, you're running a generator. You want to be notified when it's 19,000 megawatts or above, well below where we would call you. You could put that threshold in and turn on your generator. In that case, you would have turned it on yesterday for a few hours because it did just peak above 19,000 yesterday. But this comes with training, so that you can, have a look at this on peak demand days, see some of the things that we're looking at to help judge your own reaction and potentially modify, some of the things that we have advised you, to do. The next piece that is an option service for folks is what we call Peak Tracker. This is where we either through installing some equipment or potentially through an API signal would tap into your load and show it to you relative to where the peaks are. If you go down this side, this is the Ontario demand chart on the left-hand side. On this particular side, the right-hand side, it is the customer load. This is a real customer whose data has been sanitized to protect the innocent. Anytime you scroll over the line, you'll see what the various boxes are. And I've actually have some of the data points turned off just so the screen is not, as crowded as it can be. But it shows you the real-time demand, the Ontario demand, actual demand, what have you. Let me turn some of these on. So if I turn on Ontario actual demand, you'll see what's, been happening, in real time. If I look at hourly, you can see, where we are. A peak hour, where it was forecast for the day by the ISO, where the pre-dispatch forecast was, and once you get into the season, top 5 actual peaks, it can be a very useful tool. Right now, because the current top 5 peaks are very low and will be surpassed, this particular one is not of a lot of value. But come middle of July, middle of August, you can see how close today's demand is bumping up against this band here. And again, training is provided, for this, and we can turn off as much of these to clean things up so that you can see as much as or as little as you want. What this then drives is a reporting function. You subscribe to this, we'll get access to historical data, populate the database so that at any point in time you can actually look at your performance and see, okay, is it actually going to save me some money next year? So it could work as two different sort of tools. If you just curtailed yesterday for the first time, you could run this report, tell people that, hey, you guys ran around and did a whole bunch of stuff yesterday. We're on track to save X because of what you did. It's really useful after 5 good peaks when you can say, hey, versus typical facility demand, we reduced, a couple of megawatts here. And that's going to be upwards of, $1.5 million based on the prices at this, point in, in time. So it can be a budgeting tool because, again, in the GA world, what you do today, this summer, affects your bill starting next July. What we do is we use our forecasts for the GA to be the sort of proxy for the savings. Again, to give you an idea as to what has actually happened and what it will mean to your sort of bottom line. So both financially and potentially from a people management perspective, this tool can be useful. Again, this is an add-on to our service. People have been doing this for a while, have their own spreadsheets, which is fine. But if you're new to the GA game, this can make quantifying what you've done and measuring performance far easier than starting from scratch. Obviously, at times, for those of you who've been in the market for a while, there sometimes are winter peaks. If that is at risk, we tell you come about October to say, okay, you need to be ready. So this particular report might not be as useful in October, 1 year out of 5 when there are winter peaks as it is, that particular year in a March, when we'll know what the 5 peaks are. But at either one of those times, this functionality can make the accounting of what you've been done and whether it's worthwhile for you, far easier to, to quantify for the powers that be than just actually trying to do it through your own spreadsheets. I messed that up. My apologies. So again, some of this information is available in the in the handout. If you'd like that, we'll be able to take care of that afterwards. But we're getting to the end here, folks, and what makes us the leader in this industry is we've got a 24/7 network operations center. We've got redundant backup. We've got multiple well-trained staff here to ensure that you get the notices that you are looking for. If data starts to not come out of the ISO for some reason because their system's down, we're on the phone faster with them than anyone because our systems tell us immediately that they're not publishing the demand data, as opposed to you potentially wondering what may be going on in your facility if you're trying to use the free service, that I wouldn't call it service. The free information is provided, from the ISO. It's not really a service. It's just a little bit of very, very basic information. Again, our history has allowed us to spend the time, spend the money to continually work to refine the algorithms. Our demand response book, which recently grew by about 25% with an acquisition, means we have even better data as of right now than we did February of this year, because we now have another 100 customers to analyze curtailment behavior and understand truly what is going on when people do curtail historically. So those key drivers means that Rodan is always your best choice for global adjustment avoidance here in the province of Ontario. Please reach out to us afterwards if you'd like to understand the pricing, both for the for our subscription for the notices, as well as the real-time options. And as have alluded to, we are doing other things, including providing assets behind the meter so we can optimize your assets. We do have customers where we are turning their generators on and off for them so that they don't even have to think about it. We do it remotely. We are charging and discharging batteries for one particular customer, not for GA, but for other applications. So our complete suite of products gives us a significant advantage over the competition and what we are able to offer you on an ongoing basis.
I have one question that just came in. If provincial reopening gets stalled to predict 5 winter peaks. Yes, if the provincial reopening gets stalled, does it affect the winter peaks?
The answer is it. It could in theory, but really, what drives winter peaks is summer weather, and we'll have an idea come September, with reopening, without reopening, if there are winter peaks. But certainly what we saw last year as a point of reference for places that you would think would have much lower electricity demand, the commercial space, so malls, office buildings, university campus type sites, is their usage was at or above what it was in the past, even though most of their people were working from home. The reason for that, as I was told by a number of customers, is they increased air exchanges because of COVID safety concerns and wanting fresh air to come in faster. Last year's hot, summer meant they were cooling that warm air more frequently than they had done the year before. So actually had increased usage versus 2019, given that particular fact. So electrical load, with the exception of a few industries, is back to very close to where it was before. Now, electrical load is not always a proxy for economic, output. Certainly, we see that petrochemical, gasoline, ethanol for gasoline, and some other, industries. But the winter peak question is much more a function of the weather than it will be what happens with a lockdown.
Thank you. I have another question. You mentioned that sometimes the ISO demand data can go down. How often, from your experience, have you seen this happen?
At least once a year, we're calling them to say what's going on. Now, Sometimes it could be data that is demand data and is crucial, and we've seen it probably once every 2 or 3 years in the heat of the peak season. Sometimes it's other pieces of data that's more crucial for generators, power producers, but easily once, twice a year, some feed goes down. I mean, it's rare to have a complete collapse, but that has happened, in the past. It's usually bits and pieces that that go down, and that the dashboard that I showed you is used by energy traders in New York, Michigan, what have you, as they sell power into Ontario. It's used by power producers to monitor the market, here. So we get calls for a number of different things. But yeah, at least once a year, something does happen. And we've seen data be out for anywhere from 15 minutes to hours. Hopefully that answers the question.
What do you believe the medium alert level threshold to be?
So if I understand that question correctly, we think this year's peaks will be, similar to what regular summer peaks are going to be. So in the 20,500 to 21,000, 500, range. We don't see 24,000 coming back, again like it did last year, and we don't see it being, low 20,000s, which is sometimes driven winter peaks. All right, folks. Well, if there's nothing else, I want to thank you all for attending. And other questions do come up, please feel to reach out via the via our website or via the email that you received before. If you'd like handouts, please let us know, and we can forward some of this information. Or if you're interested in pricing information, obviously reach out, and we will be happy to talk to you about your particular site and or sites. So once again, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and take care all.